again, Declan Goff producing, and we're going to dive into another tale of the tape: Vikings versus Saints in the NFC this year. We've already gone through the NFC North, but real quick, a thank you to Federated Insurance and also Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Big Brothers and Big Sisters creates and supports one-to-one mentoring relationships that ignite the power and promise of youth and helps them reach their full potential. By investing in our kids and our youth, we strengthen our communities, and Federated is doing this, raising tens of millions of dollars over the years as part of the Federated Challenge. Go to federatedchallenge.org if you want to help that mentor relationship. Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America is the oldest and largest youth mentoring organization in the United States, and you can find out more and you can help by donating at federatedchallenge.org. Gentlemen, we've gone through our tail of the tape throughout the NFC North division with the Packers, Bears, and Lions. And I will say, we did that Lions-Vikings tail of the tape after the ownership news came out this morning that I can't remember her name, but like the principal owner from the Ford family, is it Martha?
Martha Ford.
I don't know.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I think you got it. I think it's Martha Ford.
So I don't know. Maybe the Lions are on the brink of major change here now that they're going to have different voices still in the Ford family. But I'm still very confident the Vikings are much better than the Detroit Lions. So
Matt Patricia, see you later. If the Ford family's smart, though, first move will be to fire the coach.
Yeah. But today's tale of the tape centers around the Minnesota Vikings and the New Orleans Saints. They've had a couple epic playoff battles.
Who dat?
2017 and 19. Who dat?
Who dat?
The Vikings might be dat because they seem to have the Saints number in the playoffs. So let's go through our tale of the tape. We're going to go through quarterback, head coach, offense, defense, and total team for 2020. Who do you like? Let's start with quarterback. Kirk Cousins or Drew Brees, or if you want to go with quarterback situations, Sean Mannion and Jameis Winston being the backups. Who do you take?
Oh, don't forget Taysom Hill.
Taysom
Hill's still there.
That's true. Taysom Hill. Yep.
Okay.
Does some damage once.
Okay. I understand that the Vikings went into the Superdome and beat the Saints, and I was very impressed. Okay. So to be clear, I'm not dismissing that. But if you right now are asking me which quarterback do I take, Kirk Cousins. So let's just peel this back to starters. Kirk Cousins or Drew Brees? I still have to go Drew Brees. Drew Brees, to me, until he just proves he can't damn play, which, by the way, might be 2020. I don't know. But we're talking about this going into 2020. And so far, Drew Brees, even though he lost to the Vikings in the playoff game, and the Vikings did a great job defensively of confusing him, Drew Brees, to me, is still the better quarterback. And so if I had to pick quarterback situations, too, if I had Drew Brees and I had Jameis Winston, okay, I don't really like him much. Taysom Hill, though, definitely provides some abilities from that position being used in a role in which he is brought in as sort of a change-up. I am taking the Saints. I'm taking Drew Brees, subject to change, but for right now, that's how I feel.
Dex?
I have been pretty vocal. I think Drew Brees has fallen off a cliff this year, just like I think Tom Brady's fallen off a cliff this year. They hit this 40 magic number mark, and they are just going to go all the way down the tube. I think Drew Brees is arguably one of the best quarterbacks I've ever seen play in my lifetime. He, up until last year, still hasn't shown very low signs of slowing down. But I think if that quarterback play starts to slip a little bit, then that team's in serious, serious trouble. And that could be said about a lot of teams, but I think when I look at how the Vikings are still set up with Mike Zimmer's defense and the way he's able to scheme, I trust that the Vikings are still going to be successful. So I'm getting Kirk Cousins over Drew Brees.
So, all right, I think we went over our quarterback rankings earlier in the week here on Purple Daily, and I actually have Drew Brees as a top 5 NFL quarterback still. And I don't know what, like, outside of maybe his arm looked a little tired at times late in the year last year. Like, this dude has led the NFL in completion percentage the last 3 years, 72, 74, and 74%. He's gone 11-5, 13-2, and 8-3 as a starter. And he's still throwing for touchdowns, and yards per attempt are up around 8. Like, all of the metrics are there for Drew Brees. The eye test is there for Drew Brees. And so, like, to Declan's point, yeah, like when you hit 40, usually there's a clock that is ticking very, very aggressively. And Brett Favre found that out when he got to his last year in a Vikings uniform. But I just feel like we've reached a different era in quarterback play, this uncharted territory where we can't just write great quarterbacks off at 40 because they're 40. I mean, Tom Brady's 43, and we're still waiting technically for him to fall off the cliff. I think if Drew Brees is engaged and he wants it, I think he can still play at a high level. Now, if he goes down, Teddy Bridgewater was great as a fill-in quarterback last year. I think he went like 5-0.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure he didn't lose a game.
He went undefeated.
Now, Jameis Winston might come in and throw 17 interceptions over 5 games and sabotage them, and so Drew Brees does have to stay healthy.
Taysom Hill might play too.
But like Taysom Hill is a gimmick player. It's not like Taysom Hill has a bunch of experience.
But Sean Payton,
taking snaps.
Sean Payton is a good offensive mind for sure. I'm just saying that I wouldn't predict that the Saints will fall off the table completely if Brees gets hurt.
Yeah, and I agree with. I think their team is built structurally, not necessarily to go 12-4 completely without Drew Brees,
right.
But I think they're still a competitive team without Drew Brees. But I will say Drew Brees in my tail of the tape over Kirk Cousins, even though Kirk Cousins is very good. Okay, next item on the list is head coach Sean Payton, who's right there with Bill Belichick as one of the longest tenured head coaches in the NFL, or Mike Zimmer.
I am not a Sean Payton fan at all. I think he's sort of an arrogant jerk. Perhaps age has mellowed him a bit, but I don't like him as a person. But that being said, here's why I'm going to go with Payton. Sean Payton is an offensive mind. It's 2020. If you were to flat out come to me and say, and I believe that they're both good coaches, okay? So my starting point is both are good. But if you were to come to me and say, Judd, I can give you a defensive mind in 2020 and you can try and stop people, or in a league that has skewed offense and values rules that help with offense. So the second choice is Sean Payton. I'm going Sean Payton, not because I like him, but because I believe that both of these guys are probably very equal as far as coaches go, but the area of expertise to me on the Payton side is more important.
Yeah, if you look how both of them stack up, they're polar opposites, but they're also very successful at what they do in their own avenues. And yeah, Sean Payton's an offensive genius. He's been there forever. I think if we're just looking at humanitarian and being a good person, yes, Mike Zimmer's far and away better than Sean Payton. But I think Sean Payton has also benefited from playing with Drew Brees for a long time. And don't forget when he got suspended for Bountygate, and the Saints did slip up for a little while. They weren't a very good team for a little bit of a run in the middle of this decade, and they struggled. So if I'm looking at it, I think as a body of work, Sean Payton has an advantage, but I think what Mike Zimmer's been able to do with his defense is more impressive to me considering the personnel that keeps coming in and coming out. So I would say slight advantage of Mike Zimmer, but I could be persuaded into Sean Payton easily.
Man, again, I like Kirk Cousins. I like Mike Zimmer. I love Drew Brees, and I love Sean Payton as an offensive mastermind. Sean Payton has 131 career wins as an NFL head coach. He is ahead of guys like Mike Ditka, Vince Lombardi, John Madden, George Allen, Bill Walsh. I mean, with another good season, he's about to jump up close to the top 20 in all-time career wins. In fact, the guys he could pass this year by just having a decent season are Pete Carroll, Hank Stram, Mike Tomlin, Tony Dungy, and come up right next to Marv Levy and Bill Cowher to get into the top 20. So Sean Payton is emerging as one of the top 20 all-time winningest head coaches in NFL history, and what he can do with an offense and the innovation. Again, I like Kirk Cousins for the most part. I like Mike Zimmer. I love Drew Brees as a quarterback, anyways, and I love Sean Payton as a coach. So far, I've got both check marks with the Saints. Total offense going into 2020. Tail of the tape, Judd Zulgad.
This is pretty simple. It's the Saints. I take Brees, Michael Thomas, and here's what I like about the Saints. So the Saints saw their O-line get worked by the Vikings genius coaching and schematics in that playoff game, right? And so the Saints immediately said, that will not do. We are going to go and restructure our offensive line, which, by the way, I don't think was a disaster, but it wasn't up to snuff. And they immediately said, we're going to make our O-line more athletic, which I absolutely love. Because, again, it's adjusting immediately to something that is going to become a problem if you don't address it. Kamara's a great player. Latavius Murray, former Viking, is a very, very solid backup. The Vikings have some nice pieces. But if you were to just say to me, okay, Judd, you can have the Saints offense or Vikings offense, it's not going to take very long, especially with Diggs gone from the Vikings, for me to say, hey, you know what, I'll take that Saints offense.
Yeah, if you're looking at it as a whole, like Judd said, even with me being pretty bullish on the Vikings in these first two categories, the Saints offense is absolutely stacked. Michael Thomas is probably the best wide receiver in the game. And Alvin Kamara came down to earth a little bit last year, but I think Alvin Kamara is still a top 5 running back. He just wasn't as lethal as he was in his first early parts of his career. And they have depth and they get creative. They put Taysom Hill in weird situations and it ends up working out very well for them. So I think just an offensive creativity, yeah, I'm taking the Saints all day.
And this is kind of the same theme for me here as the first two categories, and that I really like the Vikings offense, and I think the Vikings offense is going to be probably a borderline top 10 offense. But the Saints were top 5 offensively by almost any measurement, even without Drew Brees for a third of the season. Pro Football Focus actually had them as the number 1 overall offense. If you want to go yards per play, they were like 5th in the NFL. And the fact that they just have a better offensive mastermind head coach. Although Gary Kubiak, I don't think I'm going to put Gary Kubiak on the same level as Sean Payton in terms of offensive mastermindery. But what I love about Gary Kubiak, he knows who he is as a coordinator. He knows what he wants out of his offense. And even though it might not be this, spread them out and throw the ball 50 times and air it out like Drew Brees does, when you know what you're doing and when you're committed to what you're doing, and when you've got guys who've been in a similar system for multiple years, it allows you to operate at a higher level. And so I do expect the Vikings to have a really good offense, but I expect the Saints to have a better offense, which brings us to total defense, tail of the tape, Vikings and Saints, Judd.
Hold on a second. I got to put the glasses on and get the notepad out.
Oh,
I did some research here because the immediate default should be Vikings, right? I mean, the Vikings, Mike Zimmer's a great coach and defense, and he's going to blah, 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 blah. All right, but the Saints up front, Cam Jordan, great player. Danielle Hunter, great player too. Cam Jordan, great player. He plays with 3 other first-round picks on that defensive line, okay? The Saints' biggest weakness in 2019 was the cornerback combination that they had of 4 different guys, including Eli Apple, who now is gone. And that combination of corners, gentlemen, gave up 18 touchdowns and picked off only 2 passes. That was a problem. The Giants, if you recall, late in the season, cut loose Janoris Jenkins, who came in and played a couple games for the Saints, solidified things a bit there, and now has been signed by the Saints to a new contract. Malcolm Jenkins, who is aging, but a good safety, comes back on a 4-year deal with the Saints. This is actually a tougher decision than I thought it was going to be. All of that being said, and the Saints have at linebacker at least one very good player. But all of that being said, I am going to go Vikings, but it's not huge. And here's the thing that scares me. I feel like the Saints corners are a bit more of a known. I know that the Vikings are not. So if the Vikings had 1 or 2 corners who I said, yeah, that's the guy, I would definitely say Vikings. I'm going to say Vikings, but I'm going to do it with far more trepidation than I thought I would going into this exercise.
I think with the Saints, it's classic New Orleans Saints opportunistic defenses, right? Like last year, they were 10th in turnovers. So they created a lot of turnovers, but also teams passing them a ton. They had the 30 most pass attempts against. Teams carved them up through the air. And they were able to capitalize on interceptions and fumbles and a great line up front. It's solid. It's definitely a really complimentary, solid defense that if an offense is top 5 in the league, you can roll with that and probably get to a Super Bowl and most likely win a Super Bowl. But with what Zimmer was still able to do last season, if you want to talk about depleted cornerbacks, just like the Saints had, I mean, my God, the Vikings cornerbacks were awful last year, and the Vikings were still in top 5 in points allowed and most major defensive categories. So I still give it to the Vikings. Like Judd said, it's maybe not as wide as we think it is as a perception, but advantage Vikings. But the Saints they're opportunistic, man. They can create turnovers.
The last time the Saints had a defense that was even close to this good, they had to put tens of thousands of dollars in a bounty pool to inspire them to play at that level. This is the best Saints defense we've seen since Bountygate. And some of the things that Judd was saying about, we talk about how the Vikings have great stud players at every level of that defense. You could make the case that the Saints do too. Cam Jordan as a pass rusher, Demario Davis at linebacker. Judd brought up Janoris Jenkins as a cornerback. And I would even say, as much as he's a punchline here because of the Minneapolis Miracle, Marcus Williams is graded as one of the better safeties in the NFL.
He's turned into a good player.
He's a good player.
He's going to be remembered for the one moment where he inexplicably just dives to the ground and allows Stephon Diggs to score a touchdown. But but I would say, even with those great players, I would still take Danielle Hunter. I would still take Eric Kendricks. I would still take Harrison Smith. Like I would still take the Vikings' best player at each level except for maybe cornerback.
Right.
And so I give the edge defensively to the Vikings. So even though it's the best Saints defense we've seen, the Vikings I think still have a better defense. So total team tail of the tape. You guys going Saints or Vikings?
I'm going Saints. It's the defense is the one place that I give the Vikings the advantage, but it's very, very close. But again, I go back to offense. I said advantage Saints. Coaching, quarterback. And I know that the last two times these teams have met in the playoffs, the Vikings have won. But all of that being said, if it's one game and they're playing, I think the Saints have more components that I would trust.
Yeah, it's a pretty toss-up in my opinion. I think they're very, very even. And like Judd said, maybe the two more important infrastructures in head coach and quarterback and total offense is probably more in place, and that's what's sexy, and that's what really works in 2020. And the Vikings have some of that, but not all of the mojo that New Orleans has. I think it's probably safe to say the Saints are a better team, but I could see a slip-up where the Saints finally start coming down to earth with Drew Brees coming up, and then with Kirk Cousins finally taking another step possibly in 2020, which I still think he can do. I think the Vikings can be there. But right now, if I'm just looking at it hypothetically on June 23rd, I think it's the Saints.
This is going to sound crazy, but it's the Vikings because every step in the playoffs the last 3 or 4 years, the Saints always have the tail of the tape advantage and the Vikings always have their number. There's just something about Mike Zimmer's defense.
The
There's
Minneapolis
something
Miracle, though, my God.
But they shut Drew Brees down in the first half.
The win in the Superdome last year was impressive. I'll give you that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a legitimate, impressive win with zero flukes.
I think Mike Zimmer has. I really think to whatever degree you can have Drew Brees' number. I think he has Drew Brees' number in these big games. And so even with on paper the Saints are a better team, in a one-on-one matchup against the Vikings, for whatever reason the Vikings are better. And so I'm going to end this by saying the Vikings are my team that I would take between the two of them. That's right. Got my Vikings.
I was going to say your tail of the tape didn't match up with your final proclamation.
It did not. But you know what? Sometimes that happens in professional sports. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. It's Purple Daily with Mackey and Judd, available via podcast on Apple, Spotify, and ScoreNorth.com, and via YouTube at youtube.com/ScoreNorth. We'll see you next time.